Bitcoin all-time high, 76k. Ethereum also going up, finally. And gold goes down, yields go up. What the hell is happening after Trump has been elected as the new president? We're going to discuss it all. And the main focus is going to be altcoins today. So everything in this update is there for you on your journey through the craziness of the crypto markets. And hopefully we're going to have some positive craziness. Let's get started. Before we're going to be diving into the altcoins, we have actually recorded our new podcast, which is New Era Finance. Next Tuesday, we're going to go live with this podcast, which is going to be with Bart Brands. If you want to stay tuned and be the first there to listen to the podcast, make sure to subscribe beneath towards New Era Finance. Now it's time to discuss about everything that has been happening with the markets and Trump being elected, because that has been taking place and it has been moving the markets. The elections have shown that Trump didn't even win on a popular vote alone, but he's won the House, the Supreme Court, the Congress. Everything has been won by the Republicans, which means that everything that he wants to implement, he can just easily pull it through, which, if you're a crypto believer, is super positive. And that's referring me back towards what I said in the previous update. It is the Bitcoin strategic reserve. And that strategic reserve, depending on how big it is going to be a big angle of this cycle. And I have been referring back to the 2017 cycle, which was also during his previous term, where Bitcoin ran from a few $100 to $20,000 because a whole group of new investors were jumping into the actual asset. And actually the same is taking place again. In this cycle, we've got the ability of institutional investors to be buying into Bitcoin through the ETF. And then now also governments are stepping in, through which a strategic reserve is a big and massive step forward, that I might think that Trump is actually going to use Bitcoin to buy or to pay back the debt that they have at some point in time. And if that is taking place, and Bitcoin is currently at 1 trillion and at $75,000, then actually 1.5 trillion. But if we are at that stage and we are looking at expanding through governments and institutional investors, a 10x isn't even unreasonable to expect during this cycle. And it's not even unreasonable to expect that many altcoins are going to pull a 100x. Completely irrational, but it is likely that it will happen, in the sense that in this week we've seen several big factors taking place. First thing, finally, yes, we've seen Ethereum moving around. The price of Ethereum has been running up by more than 10%, which is the biggest move in a long time. It is showing some interesting technical factors too. And the reason that Ethereum steps up is primarily due to some altcoins that have been doing well within the ecosystem of ETH. But also due to the fact that probably some manipulation has been happening in the markets, through which whether or not Trump has been elected, and that's the actual reason why the markets are going to go up, or participants knew that the elections were going to be a big factor for crypto investors, so they were pushing down the prices of crypto until the elections took place and then reversed it back upwards. Either of the two or something in between is true. But what we saw is that, for instance, with the elections, something fun has been happening, that the big whale on Polymarket has made more than 40 million by predicting that Trump was going to win. Insane prediction markets. But the opposite and the good part is that the inflow in the Ethereum ETF is super positive, as we saw 50 million coming into the Ethereum the day after the elections took place. So that is going bananas, and just a small fraction of the inflow of Bitcoin can move Ethereum around already, which we have been seeing. It has been going up by 10%. And the second reason is that DeFi wakes up. And as you know, I'm betting heavily on DeFi, and I'm betting heavily on the ETH ecosystem. And for instance, Aave and Lido and Athena and Pendle have all been doing well. Compound and Rocket Pool and some of those projects have not been moving yet. But for instance, Aave has been making a new cycle high, which is above $180. It's the highest level. And the reason for this is that the Donald Trump coin, which is the World Liberty coin, is basically a copy of Aave. But the interest in DeFi has increased since Trump has been elected, which is super positive for ETH, which increases the demand for ETH. So once Aave moves, Ethereum follows through and vice versa. Now, in the coming period, we are going to experience a few important events, which is the FOMC and the Fed with their rate cuts and possibly starting QE, as we've seen that there were weaker labor markets in the previous period. Then next week, we are also going to have a big event, which is CPI is coming up. And that's usually a big mover for the markets in the sense that if CPI is going to be lower than expected, the actual up-only market is already firing up substantially. But once the inflation is going to be higher, it is likely that the yields will stay up. And the reason that the yields have been going up in the first place after the elections is due to the fact that the expectations are that Trump is going to increase economic growth, through which the dollar is going to strengthen, and hence why the yields increase significantly. But as a matter of fact, that is net negative for the government themselves, as their debt payments have been increasing. But if inflation is going to be lower than expected, that's going to be that big thing that we're looking for. So the question is, what do we see on our charts and what are altcoins doing at this point before we're going to dive in my strategy? What's next is the actual question. If we see Bitcoin going to an all-time high, it's been a long day and I'm getting a little bit funny at this point, but hey, the markets are going up so we can smile again. Time to discuss the charts, and I think the charts are not only about Bitcoin anymore, they are also about ETH, which I get to in a little bit. Bitcoin is currently breaking out and we have been printing a new all-time high. One side note, we have been recording this video prior to the FOMC meeting as I had to travel to Lisbon for a conference, but we have been breaking through the all-time high, as you can see. And my expectations are that we're just generally going to continue to have that upwards momentum. I think there are some charts saying that based on the M2 supply that have been increasing, which we have also been discussing on this channel, it's very likely to expect that Bitcoin follows that M2 supply. And depending on the Fed or the FOMC, it's going to increase even more. However, you always have back tests before they continue to move. So in this case, we've seen some tests at 59K. We've seen a new test at 65, which was the previous high. And then we had the pre-election correction taking place and then the breakout because Trump won the elections. Now, what is crucial for Bitcoin to hold up to? It is crucial to hold above 71K. If that happens, then this upwards trend continues to take place. So you don't really want to break beneath 66,000. And you want to keep 71, maybe 70 as support before we continue to move. And once we clearly break through the all-time high, which we are kind of doing, it is expected that the entire market is going to accelerate because in historical aspects, when this high was broken, altcoins were following through. And you can see that in the sense that Ethereum against Bitcoin has finally made a substantial move, which is more than 10%, actually 11%, clearly hitting the previous support as resistance. Now, the upside is that there is a massive bullish divergence taking place here, which is likely going to pull through. However, in order to have a confirmation, you want to have a higher high and higher low. That's not the case. You want to have a higher low first, which is you want to have support here at 0.036, depending on what the FOMC is going to do or what the markets are generally going to do. But you want to have a short consolidation taking place before a continuation is going to happen. And that continuation needs Ethereum to break through 0.04. And if that happens, that's the party time. And in this move alone, we've already seen that altcoins have been breaking by 50 to 80% in just a day. And we have seen DeFi breaking up by 30 to 40%. And Ethereum is actually breaking the trend as well, as we can see that we have been stagnating into this range since the beginning of August. Have been having multiple tests of this resistance area, and are likely breaking through it. And I had the lucky opportunity of buying some ETH options during the correction, which I have been making a beautiful profit with. What's my thesis now? Well, generally I'll be waiting for a correction to take place, but as long as Ethereum stays above 2650, it is likely that we're going to close this gap and rally all the way towards 3.2 to 3.5k. If we're looking at altcoins, then we can see that some altcoins have been taking liquidity on the downside, like Aave has been doing, and then reversed all the way back. In this case, Aave has been taking liquidity beneath $130, took it there, reversed back to the liquidity on the upside as well, and now it's going to have a consolidation where I would be interested into buying into this around $160. But you can clearly see that we are building up a new uptrend. We are clearly into a new bull cycle. I generally do not expect this to peak in 2025. I assume this is going to peak in 2026 or 2027 with a very long super cycle taking place. But at least you want to be the dip buyer as the trend is clearly making higher highs, higher lows. Now, if we're looking at optimism, that is not the case yet. I've been discussing my strategy in which I said, okay, optimism is one of the coins that I have. I want to start taking profits once it gets back towards the levels of March of this year or earlier this year. We're not even close, but at least we are starting to wake up. And you can see that the crucial area is 187. And once we break through there, it is expected to expand towards those highs. And then you get the same trend as with Aave. When we talk about another smaller coin, which is Renzo, it is making the absolutely beautiful bottoming procedure here when we look at the 3-day chart. It's a massive bullish divergence. It is clearly the altcoin bottom signaling everywhere. And I think that from here on, the altcoins are going to explode in the sense that the previous run we've seen in the beginning of this year have shown that some altcoins did a 10 to 20x. And I think that is going to be similar in this case, but probably way more as the liquidity is going to be expanded and risk on is clearly the appetite that you want to have when it comes to trading after Trump has been elected. And the final chart was basically showing that, which is total 3, which is bouncing up, fighting resistance. If actually I need to move it here. If it breaks through 700 billion, then it's very likely that the altcoin market cap is going to run towards the all-time high, which is 1.2 trillion. And when that happens, that's when the new cycle starts to kick in. So my theory here is that dip buying is the actual strategy. The weekly strategy bulletin, which is still the same. At least you know I'm fully into altcoins, which is a very risky approach. Some of your comments have been saying that I'm in very boring altcoins. I generally don't care. I'm in altcoins and I want to make more Bitcoin. And finally, we're getting into the appetite that they do well, or at least better. Ethereum has been moving up and I'm not into profit yet. But you can see that things like Aave can go up in such a fast manner that they erase the previous months of losses. So I think that with the smaller coins that I have, it's going to be a significant exploding run where I think that in 1 to 2 months, they will just erase the entire year of corrections. So my strategy actually is to just keep on holding until we get towards those regions of March of this year. And that's the first point where I start to take profit. And yes, for some of those altcoins, that means a 3 to 6x. And it sounds crazy that I'm currently looking at that, but I really believe that the markets have been waiting for the elections and the Fed to start moving upwards. And I think that those altcoins can actually do that. And the gap between fundamental value and the price value has never been as big as right now, which is also why I think that if you do not have any positions into altcoins, that right now is the actual moment to start building your positions. And right now is the actual period to change your strategy from being in Bitcoin to increasing by buying the dip. I think the markets are not going to go up in one go. It's going to be a bumpy ride. And that bumpy ride is actually providing you an opportunity of buying the dip in those altcoins, in those 30 to 50% corrections. So that's going to be my strategy. I'll be updating you on the weekly updates, but for now, I'm happily holding my altcoins. Thanks for watching to this weekly update. Next Tuesday, the first episode of New Era Finance. And of course, next week, we'll be back with 2 more updates. One educational one on the altcoin portfolio. Make sure to subscribe and I'll see you again. Ciao.